Welcome to Talk to Me Baby, the show that believes knowing yourself and living in accordance with who you are is the biggest asset you can possess in life. I'm your host, Emily Dadamas, and today we are going to talk about how to tune people out. It's actually quite fitting because this is going to be our last episode of the year before we head into 2024. And we started off this podcast with how to listen to your inner voice. And this is a similar concept, but on the flip side. Before we get into it, can we just have a moment for this beautiful vintage green jacket slash blazer that I am wearing that is satin that has, I don't know, tiger print type of embossing and design on it? It's awesome. I got this at a vintage sale. If you are listening to this on Spotify or on Apple, you cannot see it, but just trust me, it is magnificent. So I'm excited about today because it is kind of a full circle moment for us because we started off talking about how to tune in, which is really how to listen to your inner voice. And now we are going to talk about how to tune out because listening isn't just about being able to discern and understand your inner voice and what it's trying to tell you. There's also the aspect of being able to insulate yourself from the distractions of the world, aka other humans. It is what it is. So let's jump into small talk, shall we? Now, the first step is that we have to approach this from valuing our own inner guidance above other people's. Now, this is hard to do because most of us have been conditioned to value other people's opinions more highly than our own. And the reason is because we aren't really taught from a young age how to truly listen to our inner voice. It's something that we have to kind of relearn. We're born understanding this and we're born knowing that. Kids are actually extremely intuitive. They're very tapped in, but then we get talked out of it because we live in society and we live with other people and we live around other people. And little by little, we have to reclaim that and we have to get back to really being able to trust our inner voice. But naturally, what ends up happening as a consequence of that is that we start to allow other people's opinions to be more important than our own because we're asking other people for advice or we're looking to others for cues on how we should be living and what it is that we should be feeling and how we should be approaching things. And I'm not saying that it's not bad to look at everybody else's lives, almost like a menu of options of how you can live and what the possibilities are for yourself. But at some point, you need to be able to really put the blinders on. And that's going to be a main theme of this episode. You have to be able to value your own opinion above other people's because other people are not living your life. You are. So therefore, your opinion does matter more. And it is something that you have to give a lot of weight to. It's not about being individualistic and it's not about like living off in some remote forest and not ever taking anybody else's advice or their thoughts or their feelings into account. But it is about knowing when and how to let other people in so that you're not getting persuaded and you're not losing touch with your own inner voice, which would be sad. So, practically speaking, what is it that you do, right? When you're trying to tune out other people, what is it that you need to do? We're going to get into that right now. Number one, don't put yourself into a position where you have to listen in the first place. The easiest way to avoid it is by trying to minimize the chances of you being persuaded or you having to entertain that distraction of other people's opinions in the first place. One of my favorite quotes is never complain, never explain. And what that means to me is never complain is about staying focused. It's about taking responsibility for your life, not allowing other people to sway you, not allowing anything external to sway you, deciding for yourself what it is that you want to do, how it is you want to live, what it is you're going for, and going for it. Never complain. The never explain part for me is about not feeling like you have to justify where you are or where you're going. That's a big thing because a lot of us feel like we have to justify, well, I'm doing this because of this and this, because I experienced this, and that's why I'm going in this direction. And have you ever asked somebody for advice and they're telling you something and then you find yourself like backtracking and trying to explain to them why it is that you're thinking about this or why it is that you might feel an inclination to do it this way? And maybe the way that you are deciding to do things is in opposition to what they're telling you. And you're kind of getting into this, not argument, but you're finding yourself having to defend why it is that you want to, proceed in a certain way. That comes down to the never explain. Don't feel like you have to justify what your inner guidance is telling you, right? And we don't need to get into these situations from a practical standpoint if we don't put ourselves in a situation where we're going to have to then defend, or we're going to have to, dance around in a circle, and then we get ourselves into tricky issues. My number one tip when you are going off in a different direction, or you're truly listening to your inner guidance and you're making changes in your life, and these are new things for you, before you really have it figured out, before you really understand where you're going, even when you can see the path forward, but other people can't yet, right? Because it's your vision, it's your life. When you are in that phase, do not talk about it with people who are not going to be able to understand. Just save yourself the headache. Don't talk about it. Don't entertain other people's opinions. Unless you're feeling so good about it and so confident that anything that people are throwing at you is just going to roll off of you and you're not even going to notice, don't put yourself in that position, because what's going to happen is that there's a chance their opinions are going to start seeping into what your plans were or what your initial thoughts were. And they can take you on a wild goose chase and a detour that you didn't need to go down and that you didn't need to experience, because people like to warn each other about the potential pitfalls. That comes from a place of compassion. That comes from a place of lived experience and wanting to spare other people from the challenges and the things that we have faced. But I also think that it comes from this weird obsession that we as humans have of trying to avoid failure at all costs. It's not something that we typically embrace. It's something that we feel a lot of shame about. It's something that we feel like we have to avoid. It's something that we just don't want to deal with at all whatsoever. And the truth is that you learn so much more from your failures than you do your success. If you think about life like a cake, the success is like the little cherry on top. Failure is the bulk of that cake. It is the sponge, okay? It's what you're actually eating. And that's because the failures are going to teach you so much more about yourself and who you are. And you're going to learn so much more by going through those quote unquote failures. But people like to warn others. Recently, what was it? There was something going on in my house. And I remember, family friends like warning me about all but you got to do this, because they had an issue with their roof. And they were like, all the things that could potentially go wrong. And I appreciated all of that, but I trusted that it would get fixed. I trusted that it would be handled. I didn't need any of that. You know what I mean? And I understand that that's very good natured, and I appreciate that they care enough to try to spare me whatever issues that they went through. But you are not me. You are not living in my reality. Just because you had a bad experience doesn't mean that I will. At the end of the day, every one of us is responsible for the attitude, the vibration, the energy that we're bringing situations. You are not me and I am not you. And while we can learn from one another, and it's nice that we want to help each other out, we also need to remember that this situation is not the other situation, right? There doesn't necessarily need to be overlap. You have to trust that your path is your path. And it can be very inspiring and it can be very helpful to look to others and see how they have handled a similar situation. But you must take two things into account. If you're going to ask other people for their opinions, if you're going to ask for their advice, you have to take it with two gigantic grains of salt. And I'm going to tell you what they are. The first one is, unless they are living the life that you want or that situation that you want and they've been through it, don't ask them. Okay? Don't ask them for the advice, because you're not going to ask an unhappy person how to be happy. That just doesn't make any sense. The second grain of salt is, what is that person's general outlook on life? Because if that person is a complainer, if that person is a negative Nancy, don't ask them unless you want to be dissuaded or discouraged. Don't ask them. You have to be very careful when you are talking about your plans or you're talking about what you're thinking about, because people will chime in. That's just natural that they will. But you have to understand, okay, who is this person in life in general? Are they a person who's optimistic? Are they a person who is measured in what they're thinking? Are they a person who approaches life situations from a place of positivity? Are they somebody who has their feet on the ground? Are they somebody who's just always, woe is me? Is the sky always falling? Don't ask that person for advice. Don't talk to that person at all about what it is that you're planning on doing, or what it is that's on your mind and your heart, because it's not going to go well. Everyone is coming to life from their own unique perspective, everything they've lived, everything they've experienced, everything they've been exposed to. Every single moment of your life up until this point is informing how you view the world. And you can't separate yourself from that, as much as we would like to think that we can, as much as we try to put ourselves in other people's shoes. We still come to life from our unique perspective. So when other people are being noisy or are being distracting or are giving you opinions that you don't want to hear, or they are commenting on what it is that you're doing, just remember that's their perspective. Their perspective has nothing to do with you. And in fact, their opinion does not matter, point blank. It doesn't. It doesn't mean that you might not value their opinion, but ultimately the only opinion here that matters is you. And if you're listening to your inner voice and you're doing enough to get quiet, to really hear what it is that your own guidance is, then it becomes easier to take the opinions of other people, because you're not taking it to heart as much. You're recognizing it for what it is, which is, this is what this person feels about the situation, but it's not necessarily how I need to feel about the situation. I can decide for myself how I feel and how I want to feel. And that's a very important distinction to make. So don't let other people freak you out. Don't let other people dissuade you. Don't let other people deter you. Okay? If somebody is offering you a piece of cake and you don't want to eat the piece of cake, don't eat the piece of cake. Just don't. Don't accept it. Right? Like, these are basic little things that we all have to deal with that are quite trivial, but it comes up. Don't take the piece of cake. Stand firm. Stand your ground. And you know what? If they're being super pushy, take the cake and go throw it out. Go throw it out. You don't have to eat cake that you don't want to eat. You don't have to do things just because other people want you to do them. You can tune out their opinions. And listen, if somebody's being really pushy and they're giving you advice, or they're trying to persuade you of something, you can politely but firmly say, you know what, I've given it thought, but this is the direction that I'm going in. Or, you know what, I've decided this, period. No explanation. Remember, never complain, never explain. You do not owe anybody your rationale, your reasons why, unless you want to share those things. It is enough that you know what you're doing, or you know what you intend to do, or you know what you want to do. That's it. The rest of it's none of anybody else's business, unless you decide to make it their business. So be very particular about who you allow to give you life perspective. And if people give you life perspective, because you know what? Some people just like to tell you what they think and give you advice that you didn't even ask for. You can smile and nod. Oh, yeah, thanks. I'll consider that. I sure thing. And then ignore them and don't do anything they're telling you to do. The next thing I want to talk about is vampires. When it comes to being able to listen to your inner voice, vampires are the distractions. So this can be really helpful to make a list. What are the things that become distractions for you? Whether it's other people's opinions, silly things like the internet, right? Spending too much time on social media, not doing the things that you intended to do because you get sucked down a rabbit hole of videos on YouTube, and then you don't have time to do the things you want to do. Yes, you do. If you weren't watching reviews of the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette, you probably would have had more time. I'm saying this to myself, right? I could have spent this hour doing one of the things on my little list, but I didn't. I spent it wasting time watching reviews of perfume, because these are the things that I like. But I know that this is a vampire for me. So what are those vampires that get to you in your life? Where do you get stuck? Where do you tend to lose momentum? Write out that list. Oh, who tends to suck you dry as well? Because it's not just what, it's also who. And then on the flip side of that, I want you to think about the light bringers, right? The opposite of vampires. I was looking this up. I don't think there's actually like a sci-fi creature that is the direct opposite of a vampire. I don't think garlic counts. But we're just going to call it light bringers, or garlic if you want. Make a garlic list. What are those things that give you energy? What are the things that help you focus? What are those things that make you feel good? These can be very basic things like music, meditating, taking a walk, spending some time in nature, sunlight. What are those things that help you reconnect, that help you listen to your inner voice, that help you remember who you are, remember what you're doing, and remember why you're doing it? because that's powerful. Remembering who you are and reminding yourself of why am I doing this and feeling that sense of conviction, that's one of the best emotions ever. When you have a true sense of conviction, determination, focus, like that's when you feel unstoppable. That's when other people's opinions really don't matter. So, what can you do to get yourself into that state? Next thing that we have to address is that there are many negative voices that live right within our own head. So it's not just other people's opinions. It's not just headlines that we read in the news. It's not just statistics and what other people are talking about and what's happening in the world at large that can affect us and cause us to become distracted from our own inner voice. We have things to contend with within ourselves. We all have an inner critic. There's this really great book that's all about writing. It's called Writing Down the Bones. It's by Natalie Goldberg. And she talks about how when you sit down to write, you're going to have two entities, basically. You're going to have the creator, which is that pure, raw thought that's coming out of you. And then you have the editor. And the editor is the one that's the critical voice. The editor is the one that's telling you, this isn't good. This sucks. Nobody's going to like this. Nobody wants to read this. Why are you even doing this? You're not even good. Blah, 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 blah. We all have that inner critic inside of us. So her advice on this is to just let the editor say what it's going to say. Just let it get it out. Let it go through its little barrage and its little tirade of why you shouldn't or why you suck or blah, 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 and then get to work. So we need to make peace with the fact that we're all going to have an inner critic. That's not a reason to stop. Just because you have negative thoughts, just because you have limiting beliefs is not a reason to stop. It's just something that you can choose to address. And if you have a thought that keeps coming up and it's really affecting you and it's really bothering you, then it's worth doing a little bit of that work. It's worth disproving that belief to yourself, or at least finding a way to feel better so that you can move forward. But we're all going to have unnecessary, unkind, unproductive, frankly, stupid thoughts that run through our head. And so the goal is not to eliminate them completely, but just to understand, okay, yep, this is my inner critic. This is my inner editor. Let me just let it do its thing. Let it say what it wants to say. And then, thank you, ignore, and then continue, move on. Let's move on to deep talk. Being able to listen to your inner voice and being able to stay the course requires tuning in and tuning out. They are two sides of the same coin. So when you're tuning in is when you're really giving the opportunity for your inner voice to speak to you and you alone. And when you're tuning out, you are taking away the distractions and the things that might be unhelpful that will also prevent you from being able to hear your inner voice. Either way, the thing that tuning in and tuning out has in common is quiet. It's space. It's room for airflow, essentially. And there's many ways that you can do this, quite literally through something like yoga and exercising the body, feeling that air flowing through you, but also metaphorically in your head. And that's important because being able to have blinders on is going to serve you more than anything else. There are a million and one things that can distract you in any given moment. It's up to us to have those blinders on and just focus on whatever it is that we need to focus on. And if you need to disappear, and if you need to not do the typical normal thing that everybody else is doing, then so be it. It is okay for you to go off and be a weirdo for a while and not participate in the things that society thinks you should be participating in. When I was in college, I did not have a TV. I did not watch the Super Bowl for 4 years straight. Even though there were Super Bowl parties, if I had wanted to, I could. I didn't watch it. And I was perfectly content. And to be honest with you, if I never had to watch another Super Bowl, I would be perfectly content. Because I hate to say this, but I think American football is one of the dumbest sports ever. I said it. I think it is just so silly. To me, it's the worst watching experience. Stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. Nothing's happening. Something little happened. The constant pausing is enough to drive one insane. I don't like it at all. And that's me. That's how I feel about it. If somebody is throwing a Super Bowl party, I feel pressure to go. But the truth is, I don't need to. I don't enjoy it. Can I go for the social aspect if I want to? Yeah. But there's no reason why you have to do the things that everybody deems that you should be doing, right? The society deems that you should be doing, That's quote unquote normal. That's what everybody else is doing. Therefore, you have to. Who says? You don't. You have permission to do things your own way, for you to opt in or opt out as needed. And you don't need anybody else to tell you yes or no. Okay. All you need to do is listen to your own inner voice. Do I really want to do this right now? No. Then don't. Don't. Obviously, we all have obligations in life, and there's certain things that you cannot get out of that you need to do. And we have to balance those things. But when you have the freedom to choose, exercise the freedom to choose despite how it might look to people on the outside. Having blinders on is one of the kindest things that you can potentially do. It is not rude. It is kind to yourself. It is kind to who you truly are. And living in accordance with who you truly are is the biggest asset you can possess in life, right? We say it in the intro every single week, and it's because it is true. When you know how to do that, you feel a sense of freedom, a sense of power, a sense of direction. Like you are actually in control of your life and you are actually directing the experiences that you have, and you are choosing to operate in a way that actually makes you happy. Remember that focus is the most precious commodity these days, and everybody wants a piece of your focus. You do not need to give it to them unless you want to. It is up to you. And I think you should be using your focus for the things that are important for your life, the things that matter to you. And when you tune in and you tune out, that's when it becomes possible. And that's when you can truly begin to discern and listen to and take action on what your inner voice is telling you. I'm Emily Adamas. This has been your episode of Talk to Me, Baby. If you have enjoyed it, please do the internet things, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will talk to you later.